So hello everyone and welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial. Thank you to everybody who is sending in LinkedIn messages and emails and those kind of things. I know that this is kind of resonating with a lot of you, which I'm really pleased with. So, I know that a number of you have asked me for more information on some of the tutorials that I have released. These are tasters. If you really want a little bit more detail, because I know there's a lot of consultants that watch my stuff as well, get in touch and I'll be more than happy to spend some time on the phone with you if you want to do that, or over Skype or whatever, to discuss your particular challenges. But today we're talking about something slightly different. Just to finish off the top 5 series, I want to talk about something that I get asked specifically when I'm talking to very senior individuals in organizations. Now I have today, I'm basing this on an example, a real example of a conversation that I've had with a very senior person, and I'm talking somebody who was just below government level. So very senior individual that just is busy managing multiple projects, billions of pounds worth of assets, and just needed me to get to the point. And so today we are going to talk about what does S1000D good look like. And that's because when I was supporting this particular organization, I had like I said, a pretty senior chap said to me, look, this is all very interesting. We get lots of people in here telling us that we should be using structured languages and we should be using S1000D. And but Mike, can you just tell me what good looks like? Now, of course, good looks like very different things to different people, depending on where you are in the supply chain. Again, any examples I'm using in here are just things that I have imagineered based on real life projects without actually naming anybody. So the reality is depending on where you are, depends what good looks like. So I'm going to give you 2 examples today because it's a YouTube teaser. It's not necessarily a full-on tutorial. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, and depending on where you sit in the S1000D project or the information supply chain, which I'll talk about shortly, depends on what good actually looks like. So good is very different depending on where you sit. Now on my projects, I talk about, or on my training courses as well, I talk about a phrase that I coined called the information supply chain. Okay, we're all very familiar with supply chains, but I talk about the information supply chain. And when I draw a triangle on the board and we talk about typical S1000D projects, and anybody who's done my training courses knows exactly what I'm talking about. We talk about the challenges at every different layer, every different tier of that triangle, especially when it comes to working with S1000D. But assuming that's all perfect and it's all roses in the rose garden, we're going to talk about where we might be sitting from a different perspective. So if we are very much in the manufacturing chain, we're actually in the assembly of our particular product. Again, these are images that I've had made that I use specifically for my training courses. So we have our platform that has a prime supplier. I know that some of you will call it tier suppliers and all those things, but I'm just trying to keep it very generic. And so we have our primes, we have subprimes, and underneath them we have lots of different suppliers. Now this, I hope, doesn't surprise you or shock you. Most platforms today are made up of systems and subsystems and components from lots of different suppliers and lots of different partners. Shock horror if you didn't know that. And of course, all of these different people in the actual production supply chain are responsible for different areas of the actual platform itself. And therefore, we have a problem. And what that problem is we have to manage this information supply chain. And we have to have a methodology where we can bring all of our technical publications, all of our content together so that we can make something that's coherent, that we can actually create into a technical publication. So here in the actual thick lines, the actual full lines, is the information supply chain that I talk about. So we want to have our supply chain giving us content in a way that the Prime can actually go off and do what they need to do, which is put the platform together, of course, but also construct that technical publication, whether that in this case is an IETP on a tablet, but we could be talking about PDF, and I hope you watched my video last week. So good from this perspective. We won't go through all of these, but on my training courses we would. We have to have a methodology for giving us S1000D good for lots of different components of our platform, as well as our technical publication. So, you know, things like having a common approach to producing our technical publications, what are the right software solutions for our particular platform, what are our processes that we are going to put in place, where's the necessary guidance, how are we going to accept our data, how are we going to, is there any rejection criteria, how are we going to integrate that data. All of these things is critical from a Prime's perspective. So the Prime needs to have a methodology that they can say to, I did have some numbers off the top of my head, some of the new platforms have got thousands of suppliers, and you know, obviously not all of those will be creating technical publications, but the majority of them will be creating data sheets or something along those lines. So we have to have defined processes and methodologies on how we're going to bring this stuff together. So that is very, very different. And then that green line at the top there is moving on to my next slide, which is we have to think about it from this very senior official who asked me my opinion. And he was only really concerned about the final platform outdoing its mission and actually doing what it needed to do. Again, this is only an example of a platform and it's not representative of a particular product. But what I'm saying here is that technical publication that you saw on the previous slide was brought together to make a end product, whether that's the IETP or whether that's some kind of paper-based technical publication. Again, only examples here. So this guy that I was talking to was only concerned with the end product and how his users can use it. And here I've given 3 examples, whether the operators, whether it's the training environment, or whether it's the maintenance environment. So, and what we need to do is we need to understand what good actually looks like for these guys. But what's important at the top of the slide there is these guys don't care about structured languages. They don't care about S1000D. They don't care about business rules. They don't care about all of that stuff. What they care about is that the technical publication is enabling them to do the job they need to do. I had a great conversation with a very smart guy not so long ago, and we were talking about the role of the technical publication. And, you know, we were having these philosophical discussions about should we be using structured languages? Should we be using S1000D? Should we be creating different IETPs? Those kind of things, you know, from RoboHelp or whatever. And we were having these discussions, and I said, you know, for me, the technical publication is very much like the lubricant in an engine. I said, you know, it's there, it's protecting the engine, and without it, very, very quickly our engine would fail. So we need to make sure that it's good and it's quality, and the engine will last a very long time. And he goes, yes, Mike, that's true. And I agree with your analogy. He said, but depending on what Rollman I'm in and where I am in the world, depends on what lubricant I would put in my engine. And he's absolutely right, of course. So, but if we're going out to something either paper-based or an IETP-based output here, very simple example, that we want to be sure that it's actually delivering something to our end users. So from this very senior official's perspective, we talked a lot about the environments that he wanted to go out to. Now his vision was that everybody on his platforms would actually be using tablets, and you know, so then we talked about what does good look like, and here you can see all of the things that I kind of listed, saying, you know, we need to talk about the usability of an IETP. What I find frustrating is when I see IETP solutions that have not been designed by anybody that actually knows how to maintain a piece of equipment, whether that's a ship, a submarine, an aircraft, a tank, whatever it might be. And, you know, clearly very, very nice designs, but not actually thought about how the user of that information actually needs to use it based on their particular task and what they're doing. So I talk a lot about click time. If we're losing click time and we're navigating away a lot, this starts to reduce the confidence of our users when they are using our technical publication, in this case an IETP based on a tablet. So we need to make sure that it's usable, it instills that confidence, they feel they can rely on that data, it's current. What do I mean by enables? Well, we need to be sure that it is that lubricant in the engine. We need to be sure that it is actually enabling our maintainer, our operator, the training environment to do what they need to do, the functions that they need to perform. If we are disabling our end user, i.e., you know, every time we click on something it says link broken, or we go to click on an image and it says file not found, or something along those lines, you know, that reduces the confidence in our technical publication, but it actually reduces the time that they're actually doing the functions they need to do, because they're spending more time messing around with technical publications that aren't useful or usable. And that causes a huge amount of frustration, certainly around, you know, the guys that I speak to. And, you know, as I mentioned there, you know, these guys don't care about S1000D. I'm lucky enough to still know maintainers that I went through training with, and their career path is still very much in the maintenance environment. And I ask them, what do you think of those technical publications? And they go, well, you know, and they'll tell me if there's something that frustrates them. And I'll say, well, what do you think about the S1000D look and feel? And they'll, well, what does that mean? You know, they have no idea, and nor should they care. So we need to think about how they need to use the information that we're giving to them. And we need to think about the accessibility and the maintainability of the content. And anybody who knows the kind of platforms that we're talking about in some environments, we need to be sure that we can actually get information to the maintainers wherever they might be in the world. And, you know, it's very difficult to get technical publications to certain parts of the globe. So we need to be sure that we can make sure it's accessible, but maintainable is the important thing. If you're being given this and it looks fandango when you're being given a presentation in a nice warm office somewhere, can we actually, if there is an update, can we get that update out to the field force? Can we get it out to our MROs? Can we get it out to people who may be stuck in a very different part of the world? And I have seen projects where they've gone down this IETP route. They realized very, very quickly that there was certain users of their product they couldn't use the IETPs on because they couldn't maintain them, because they simply couldn't get the updates out to update the instances of the IETPs. So what did they do? They decided to go back to paper. We'll just go to PDF, and we'll do our very best to just send out loose leaf type updates. I know we're going back a few years, right? But that's what happened. So good is different, very, very different from an end user's perspective. But we need to be sure that if we're doing something like this, it's actually adding value. And what I mean by adding value is, I know I talked about ROI last week, but are we actually improving how these domains want to use that technical information? Are we actually adding value to their day? Are we actually making it easier for them to access and find content, order parts, access warnings and cautions and those kind of things? Or are we frustrating them? Some IETPs will ask you to acknowledge a warning and caution, which is perfect, and you want that in most environments. Not all projects want it, I know, but in most environments you want that. But you navigate away, you come back, and it tells you to do it again, you know, and that is ill thought out IETPs, but it's only going to frustrate your end users, which means if we start frustrating end users, they start to try and circumvent what's going on with the technical publication, and they will find shortcuts. So depending on where we're going and where we are in that supply chain, so depending on where we are in that information supply chain, really depends what good looks like. And that's kind of how I try to answer it. We have to look at it from, last week I talked about perspectives when it came to ROI, and I know that a lot of you sent me some thoughts on that. I talk about perspectives here on S1000D. End users should not be caring about the fact that it's an S1000D technical publication. And, you know, I don't care particularly about any of the design tools, etc., that were used to create my new motorbike that I've just bought. So those of you who know that. So, you know, I don't care about all of that stuff. I care about riding it. I care about enjoying it. I care about getting out on it in the same way that our end users care about the technical publications. So that's it. The good is very different depending on where you are. Let me know what is good for you. Let me know if you found this valuable. I have lots of questions. I am going to be doing a little bit more around software and making it, how we make S1000D accessible. That's a big thing that I've had from you guys, and you want to know how can we make S1000D accessible? How can we drive down the cost of S1000D is another thing that we're going to look at. I've had some questions around how can we use your material to teach our managers. This is the kind of stuff we need to be looking at. So just get in touch and I'll be more than happy to share content with you. But until next week, I'll see you on the other side.